G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan the hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, The Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting. Do you want to kick off? Do you want me to do it? Do you want to do it?
Yeah, sure. Let's go. Yep, let's get into it. So, welcome everybody to another episode of the Hunters Campfire podcast, and it's lots going on as we get ready for the raw and rut periods up this way. But before we get into that, welcome Mark, co-host to the podcast. It's good to see you back again.
Hey guys.
And we've got Mark Banasiak with us. Hey, welcome Mark. Thanks for joining us. I know it's late, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No, it's been great. We've been trying to get you here for a few weeks, but we finally got the diaries to sort up. So that's great. What's going on in the world? I don't know if I'm gonna call it. It's gonna have to be Mark V and Mark. Well, that's going to get complicated as well. Mark Vanden Bogart. What's happening in the week?
My mother would be proud of that pronunciation. Thank you very much. Look, the big news for me, it's big news, but was big news for me is I went hunting last week. And so I hunted Monday through Thursday down at Severn State Forest. Thank you, Mark Banasiak, for allowing public land hunting in New South Wales and allowing us Queenslanders across the border to do it. That park's almost our property, you know that, don't you? The Severn is basically almost property.
I had somebody the other day on the on our podcast chat asking us politely to bugger off out of the park for a little while so someone else could have a turn.
Oh well.
As if we were booking it all up. Yeah.
You sneeze, you lose. We were there 4 days. I arrived Monday. The reason why we did that was, as Queenslanders will know, we had what I refer to politely as the milder variant extension to the school holidays. So we had 2 weeks of extra school holidays for the bug. And on the Monday morning, I dropped my sons off at school and said goodbye to my wife and headed south. So we got there about 1, set up and hunted through the 3 days. It was tough going. It's always a tough place to hunt, especially in summer. But we got on them early-ish Thursday morning. So we managed to put some animals in the freezer. But more importantly, I suppose we saw, well, technically we didn't see, you saw game on the first day, but we saw game every day. So we saw pigs too, or pig, which is always an exciting thing for me, you know, knowing how much of a deer hunting / pig hunting aficionado I am. So yeah, we're pretty happy about that. Did a lot of Ks, a lot of climbing, got really up into the rock country, had a really good time. We and those who are listening, it's weird because we're talking about something that will probably, there's a video for it and it'll probably be released before this podcast, so it's kind of out of sync. But we also managed to record a podcast while we were hunting, which was really good fun, and it's going to be interesting to see how that actually turns out. So we actually did kind of close to a campfire podcast.
Was kind of close. Yep.
You could see it in the background.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, but Anyway, that was good, and it was a bit of a chaos of tangled mess. We'd show up with the toys and the cables and the wires and the dog to trip everything up and all those sorts of things, and we managed to get one sorted out. So I'm looking forward to putting that together. My week, I decided to take on small game hunting, and I've decided to take on cooking of said small game. I've never eaten hare in my life. I'm not sure I'm looking forward to it, but I'm going to give it a crack because they're running around all over the place. And I watched this European chef who cooks for, you know, very famous people. He did a video on YouTube about cooking hare. He said it was one of his go-to game meats if he was going to cook a fantastic meal for somebody. He said, better and more refined than venison and with a nicer flavour. And I thought, well, if that's the truth, I'm going to have a go at that. I put that up on the page the other day, and I've had mixed comments. Most people saying you're freaking mad. Why would you bother doing that? But I'm going to do it. I'm going to cook it 5 or 6 different ways and see if I can make it taste any good. And I'll leave the brick out of the water, as somebody said. I should add that as an ingredient. You'll know the story about the brick. Mark, what's happening in New South Wales?
Well, it's just been fairly busy. I was just down in Beda for a by-election down there, and I was able to sneak away across the border into Victoria one afternoon for a sneaky sambar hunt. But no such luck nailing one. But it was good just to be out down there. I was out on the coast near Marlow on a private property down there. A mate got me on there, so but yeah, it was good just to be out and going for a walk. But yeah, no such luck nailing one. They were too smart for me this time. But yeah, look, back in Parliament this week. Our lower house guys are sitting in Parliament this week, but we're starting to sit next week. You Queenslanders probably wouldn't understand that because you only have one house. So in New South Wales, we have 2 to play with. Yeah, so yeah, fairly busy.
Good to get away. Good to get out of that for a hunt, though.
Yeah, it is good. And I've also got a state forest hunt planned with my club next week. At the end of a long sitting week, I'm going to head out to the Central West, out near Oberon Way, and see what we can find out there. Great.
Before I get into who you are, for those that don't know who you are, you've alluded to a fair bit of that already, but I'll run through a brief bio that I've found. Hopefully, it's up to date. Where is your where is your local hunting club? What is your local hunting club?
Oh, it's Illawarra Hunting Club.
Yep.
We started it in about 2016. It started with me, my brother-in-law, and 2 mates as more of a drinking club in my brother-in-law's garage. while we waited for the New South Wales Firearms Registry to approve our club approval, we had DPI were fairly quick. They were back within a couple of weeks, and same with fair trading. But yeah, the Firearms Registry really dragged the chain. I think it was like 6 weeks to get anything back before we could start doing firearms tests and taking on members. So yeah, so starting 2016, and I think we're sitting over 800 members. So it's
very well known. Yeah, it's very well known.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
No, well, I think it's a good thing. No, I'm not knowing it for the wrong thing. I just see it come up all over the place. So
we're sort of very, we set it up that way to be sort of fairly loud and proud, and doing a lot of shows, and we sort of have that saying, well, if we're gonna go and do these things, we're just going to go out balls out and just really promote it. So we've got club merchandise, club branded gazebos. We've got a stack of club sponsors that we that give our members discounts at their stores and products, etc. And do a bit of cross promotion with those sponsors. And yeah, look, it seems to work, and we really set it up to focus on the social side of hunting, which just sounds a bit weird because everyone sort of sees hunting as a bit of a solitary thing. You go out by yourself, but I think, as you were alluding to, you come back around the campfire and you want to sit down and tell tall stories and share a laugh and a joke, and that's what we sort of tried to focus it on, try and get people engaged that way, particularly new people, because there does tend to be a bit of a certain element within hunting that doesn't take to new people coming into the sport and doesn't want to encourage new people. Whereas we've sort of taken an opposite approach and really focused on social side and getting new people, training them up and teaching them out in the forests. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we find we do a lot of that with our club as well. We don't tend to do too much social outside of hunting, but we try and have, we use the New South Wales State Forest, our license hunts as a way for us to get together and travel away from families and everything else, and just have that consolidated bit of time. with each other, and that's a great place for new hunters to come in. So it's a great asset you've got down there. That's really good.
Yeah, and it's an easy way to introduce people into it. You know, you're not running the risk of burning, you know, one of your private properties that you've got access to, because you're constantly bombarding them with new people, or, you know, a new person does something silly. It's a nice way to introduce people into the pastime.
Oh, very good. Well, I have a bio here that I just want to read through, and I'll probably stop after every paragraph because it's kind of come up with some conversation anyway. So it's from the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers website, so I'm assuming it's up to date. Talks initially about you being a high school teacher with 15 years experience in New South Wales public schools, receiving recognition at both a regional and ministerial level for excellence in education delivery. You're still a teacher? You are busy?
No, I had to give that up, actually.
Something
about you can't have two government jobs at the same time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So I actually had to resign my position pretty much the day that the vote was coming down to decide whether I was actually elected or not. So that was a little bit daunting.
I bet.
Yeah, and then they delayed the vote by the vote was supposed to come down on the Friday, and then they delayed the vote to Monday, and I already tendered my resignation. So
wasn't it a bit of a case of here's my resignation, boss, but don't read it until
Monday?
Hang
on to that.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. People on my office sort of joke about it now. They're saying, "Oh, you were sort of never in doubt, but you were panicking." But yeah. So that part of the bio is correct.
Yeah. Okay. And whereabouts did you teach?
I started out, did about 5-6 years out in Western Sydney. Got time off for good behaviour and got a job back down on the coast where I live, in Wollongong. Did 6 years at a school down in the Dapto area, and then got a promotion up a little bit closer to home as a head teacher, and then was doing sort of relieving deputy and relieving principal work towards the end of when I decided to pack it in and get into politics.
It turns out that teachers can be good people. There you go. I never thought that when I was a student. But you're the second teacher that we've had here as a on the podcast. Dylan was a top bloke as well, and brought a lot of his outdoor world into the classroom. Have you managed to do much of that in your world of teaching? Because obviously it's crossed over with your hunting life.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, one of my subjects was geography, so it sort of really fitted really well. So I actually talked to the kids about what the environment looked like outside of Google, and did a lot of stuff about introduced species, and also just sort of native and introduced species sort of adaptations, and just how they actually interacted in the wild, and the importance of obviously managing the environment in an active way, and not just locking it up and leaving it. So look, I think the kids enjoyed that. I started actually recruiting a few other teachers into hunting and shooting as well. I sort of joked that we had a bit of a militia going at my last local school. We had,
that would probably be a bad choice of words, but yeah,
possibly.
Upon reflection,
yeah, it was it was a small gathering of like-minded people.
That's right.
Well, that's great. That's great. It's always an interesting topic when you talk about how to bring the conversation of hunting into the workplace, especially the modern corporate workplace. I work for a large corporation, and I've never been shy to talk about it, and my team knows exactly what goes on when I disappear, early on a Friday and I'm not seen for the rest of the day. But it's an easy topic to talk about when you're upfront about it. And we often have people ask how to get access to more hunting land, and especially up in Queensland where we don't have public land hunting. So how do you even get onto private land if it's not in the family, or if it's not a neighbour or someone that you already know within your inner circle? It's very, very difficult. But the advice I sort of give is be open about what you do. Don't be scared to talk about it. There's nothing wrong with what we do. It's, you shouldn't be shy about it. And if it comes up at the neighbour's place or a barbecue with people that you don't know, you never know who's going to be listening or you're talking to that has access to land that can help you out. So just interesting that, you've done that at the school. But people are always trying to figure out how to edge that conversation in.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways is to bring the food to the table and say, look, bring in some venison for the staff morning tea or whatever it is, and just say, look, this is something I caught or shot the other day, and this is what I've turned it into. And like people are stoked to eat venison or eat goat or eat something a little bit exotic, and it sort of breaks the ice. And I think that I found that they're less sort of I guess negative about how you actually got it to them when they're sitting there eating it.
Yeah, it's very true. I think unfortunately the perception amongst the non is very immature in a way. It's this kind of it's basically wake and fright type thing. Guys in the ute driving around a paddock with cowboy hats shooting at things, literally. Like the scene from Wake and Fright. So when you actually talk to people, I went to the eye tests this week, and the optometrist, I said, unfortunately my left eye, which is my dominant eye, is not as good as my right eye. And I went, oh bugger. And he said, what's wrong? And I said, well, that's the eye I put up the rifle scope. I want that one to be the best one. And so he said, and from there, and then, he said, what do you know? And he said, what do you hunt? And I said, what? And he goes, oh, wow. And I said, what are you doing? I said, well, we eat it, And then he goes, oh, well, oh, wow, that's interesting. So, that idea of the food as a vehicle of introducing the topic is very powerful, I think.
I think I'm also surprised about how many people, when you finally break that ice and you approach the subject, they actually put their hand up and go, oh yeah, I hunt as well, or they know someone that hunts, and it's just it's almost like they were waiting for someone else to introduce the topic, and then everyone just relaxes and everyone starts talking about it more freely. It's interesting.
Probably right. I was on a property the other day, so there's a red deer block that I look after, have access to, and there's been a wild dog population coming through it, and the neighbours have sheep, and they've been really worried about these wild dogs, and I just happened to get them on camera, able to go and talk to them, and they gave me access to their property just in case I needed to chase a dog down or something like that. They're more than welcome to do it. They have deer running through there, and getting to have a conversation with them. I said, well, honestly, I'm in this for the deer, and the other property lets me take one from time to time because I manage the dogs. And he originally thought that I just wanted to blow the deer away, like just for the hell of it. But straight away that turned into a conversation about food, like I said. And we don't mind if you take one for meat. That's fine. Just leave some here for us. And away you go. So it's just you're right. It's just about broaching the subject, and I think it's important.
Yep.
Years ago,
I got pulled over by the coppers at Moore there during the roar up in Brisbane Valley. Came around the corner and he's just waiting there. And they obviously, that was when they run the license plates and they know you've got a firearms license. So I go past him, he just follows me up and pulls me over and he says, how many guns you got in the car? And I go, well, I got a rifle in the car. And he goes, he gives a look, so he does an inspection. And he goes, what you doing? And I said, I'm going this place. Here's the name of the property owner, blah, blah, blah. Everything's kosher. He's giving me a hard time for about 5 minutes, and then just I'm about to leave. He goes, "Oh, well, make sure you drop some deer meat on the way back through." I went, okay, sure, mate.
He could have
slapped me around a bit, and then said, "Give me some deer meat while you're at it."
He could have led with that.
Well, he said, when giving me the interrogation, then goes, "Well, make sure you bring some meat in too." Well, okay, sure.
Off you went.
Yeah, I didn't do it though. Went back.
So, Mark, the keenest of recreational hunters and fishers, you've been involved in various associations and groups over the 15 years. Currently, the chair of the Federation of Hunting Clubs, which has grown from 36 to 51 clubs under your leadership. I'm really interested in that. I've not understood and I haven't gone and looked too hard either, because it would be great to get an explanation from you, what the Federation of Hunting Clubs is and who's part of that. That's
Yeah, sure. So in New South Wales, under our legislation, you have peak bodies or peak associations that each, like a club, has to be a member of to actually be an approved club by our firearms registry. So the Federation of Hunting Clubs is one of those peak associations.
Right.
And when it was originally set up in the legislation, there was a lot of focus on, I guess, target shooting peak associations. And then John Tyndall, who was the first member of our party, actually sort of got in Bob Carr's ear and said, no, we need something. We need a peak association for hunting clubs. And that's where the Federation of Hunting Clubs was born. And I took over that. When was it? That's probably about 7-8 years ago now, and it was sort of sitting at around 30 odd clubs, 31 clubs, and wasn't really doing much. And then I took it on and sort of said, well, what do we want a peak association to do? What do we, we want to try and actually grow our clubs and encourage new clubs to be set up. So from that, we've grown it, and a lot of that growth is actually new clubs coming on, like the Illawarra Hunting Club and Clarence Valley Hunting Club, which is a bit closer to you guys. And so it's just about promoting new clubs, new small to medium clubs to get established, and so it's sort of gone from there. Probably our main role is probably keeping the firearms registry in check. With doing, I guess, negative stuff to our clubs, or putting our clubs through arduous things that isn't necessary or isn't even within the regulations. So it's about protecting their interests, but also promoting the sport and promoting hunting. So
that's an important job. We don't have anything like that in Queensland, Mark.
Not that I can think of, which probably answers the question. If it doesn't readily come to mind, then it's hardly a peak body, or
I don't pretend to be up to speed on all of those sorts of things, but it's definitely not something I've heard of. And we often talk about how the unified voice of the hunter and the hunters clubs doesn't seem to exist. Looks like you're far more advanced down there. Maybe that's why you've got public land hunting as well, or still have it, because you've got people representing you properly.
Look, I think that might be part of it. We've had a fair share of attacks on public land hunting, and we're still getting that. And I think that's partly because of the success of growing the sport and growing clubs, and also growing public land hunting. And there's a natural assertion that those people that are signed up for public land hunting support the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers Party, and I think the government of the day sees that as a bit of a threat, and that's why they're doing things like getting the local land services to do helicopter culls in and around or over state forests at the moment, to try and undermine what is a very good system. So we've become a victim of our success a little bit, that we're attracting that sort of negative attention from government bodies.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've been hearing a lot recently in social media about the timing and the targeting of deer just pre-raw. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and what is equally unfortunate is they just leave them on the ground. No. There's no harvesting of it. They're just left to rot, which then brings in other pest species like wild dog and foxes and etc. And they're even doing that over people's private properties too, which is even more disappointing. So
yeah, we see that up here as well. There's a large population of fallow in the south of Queensland, and they've had 3 or 4 years of helicopter culls going over that. And I'm not going to say that I'm not part of the conversation, but it looks this way, that they're almost saying, well, we're dealing with our pest problems, so neighbouring farmland, you need to do it as well. And by the way, we'll do it for you at no cost now. And if you don't want to do that, then it's going to become a burden for you, and we'll enforce that. that point that you're going to need to look after it. So, the farmers don't seem to have a say in it, although, they're probably trying to keep the animals in check themselves. But
yeah, but what if that farmer wants to manage it as a resource?
That's it.
Well, some of them do. Some of them do.
As a money stream, whether it's charging people to come on and shoot trophy animals, or whether it's for meat, or it's give the farmer a choice.
Yeah, and there's the tension, right? Because right next door may be a vineyard. The neighbour doesn't want it, but the other guy does. He can't control them and keep them in, so it becomes a problem. But yeah, it's been a shame because there's been thousands of them shot and left, and it has caused an issue with dogs and pigs and various different other things. But it's just the way it is. It's a real pity.
Yeah, look, it's the point there is about utilisation, isn't it? That's the whole thing. I mean, as long as we regard them as pests, then we just got to spend money on them. That's it. It's a sunk loss. It's always going to be a loss. So,
and the reality is you'll never eliminate them.
There is no vertebrate that we have introduced that we've got rid of.
No,
there is not one. No matter what people tell you, whichever side of the coin they look at it, we have not got rid of any of them. We seem to be very, very good at introducing them and establishing them because we can't get rid of them. So yeah, you can't. They don't go. They just don't. They stay. They even with the well, technically in real terms or modern terms, the billions they threw at trying to get rid of rabbits didn't work. 2 whole new viruses, a whole lot just didn't go. Yeah.
Well, you would know that because you've done the R license test. It's actually listed there as a question.
It is.
Yeah. It's economically and physically unfeasible, impossible.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, well, they recognise it, but anyway, they continue doing what they're doing, and it's interesting to hear that you think it's more of an attack on the process than just coincidentally trying to manage them at the same time as a lot of hunters are trying to hit the parks. But
yeah, well, they were doing when we quizzed them in what we call budget estimates the other year, they tried to blame it on the fires and saying, "Oh, we're just helping out the local." We're helping out forestry, we're helping out the local farmers in dealing with animals that have sort of been burnt by the fires. But the problem with that argument was the forest that they were doing it in were nowhere near bushfires. So
how do they get away with it?
Because no one else is calling them out. The media doesn't particularly see it as a sexy story. I think at least in New South Wales, the current government has had a bit of a monopoly on the mainstream media for the last couple of years. Unless it's COVID related, you're not getting in the papers.
Yeah, that's true. There seems to be, and we see this a lot with the ADA. There's a lot of news that comes through that talks about, looking at some of the false information that's coming through and being presented, and how we're defending it, or how the ADA is defending it, and various other groups are doing the same thing. But time after time, it just seems that they're just proving false information that keeps being pushed forward. You got to wonder how many times that people can blatantly lie before they're just asked not to speak. I don't get it. I mean, I'm a simple guy, right? It just doesn't. If someone lies and they get caught out, then they're discredited and move on. It doesn't seem to be the case. It just keeps coming and coming.
No, in politics you get promoted.
Oh. Excellent.
Yeah.
So let's talk politics for a sec. Not that was, I have you listed here as being a member of the New South Wales Upper House. I don't protest to understand all about politics and who sits where and what, but I'd love to know. So you're with the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. You're in the seat at the moment. What is it that you do, and how do you go about it, and how important is it that we are in tune to how politics is pulled together, and what do we do to support? Lots of stuff in there, but I'm really interested in what you do and how you go about that, how we can help.
Yeah, okay. So let's probably tackle the first part. What do we do and how we go about it? I I guess we tackle it in various ways. Obviously, we in New South Wales you have the lower house, and they, I guess, like Queensland, they represent a geographical area. The upper house is based on your party's vote across the whole state. So essentially, my electorate is the whole state on behalf of the party, which keeps me busy. But so the upper house is essentially like a house of review. So traditionally, legislation is made in the lower house, and then we take a look at it, touch it up a bit, amend it, make it better, and send it back down. We have a stack of committees too, which is probably a large part of our work. So various committees across different portfolio areas. So
it's a long list. I read your list.
Yeah. I'm the chair of probably one of the more important ones for us, which is agriculture and industry. So that covers the fishing, the hunting, the farming, and a whole stack of issues. So I think I'm on. Last time I checked, I think I'm on about 9 committees at the moment, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, some of them are just select committees, which just come up on topical issues and then they go away. But committees are a big part of our work, where we sort of look at particular issues and we take submissions from people and go out on site visits and try and really investigate sort of key issues that are happening in the state, and try and put forward recommendations or on those issues to try and get the government to do certain things. So it's a lot of talking and a lot of arguing and debating, and I guess a lot of, in some cases, embarrassing the government into doing things they don't necessarily want to do. So that's in a nutshell what we do. What was the other part of your question?
I guess how important is it for the average hunter, fisher, outdoor enthusiast to be aware of that, and what should they do to support and help and be part of that, or lend a voice? Or it's hard for people that don't understand politics. It's easy to sit back and say, well, it's happening, but what does the individual punter do about it to strengthen things?
And it's hard to be engaged in it when you see politicians carrying on like bloody pork chops on TV and sending text messages to each other and calling each other pricks and all that sort of stuff. So I guess the average punter, it's important for them to be engaged, because there's a lot of stuff that happens that if they're not engaged sort of sneaks by. And we're only 5 members out of probably 60 or so in the parliament. So there's a lot of issues that we're trying to cover, but we don't necessarily. Essentially, the average punter is the eyes on the ground for us locally. So if they hear or see of a local issue that impacts them, whether it's fishing, hunting, whatever, it's important that they're engaged, and then they can come to us and say, hey, Mark, there's this issue here, whether it's a lack of access to a fishing spot, or there's particular issue with a state forest that's causing grief. If they're engaged, and then they can raise that issue with us, and then we can take it up for them and try and get a result. So they're essentially our eyes and ears where we can't be. But I guess it's also important for them to be engaged, because it's their pastime, and whether we like it or not, fishing and hunting is political. There are people out there that don't like what we do and don't want us to do what we do. They're not just satisfied with not liking the pastime themselves. They actually want to see it end. And we've seen that with we had the marine park issue down here in New South Wales in 2018, where they wanted to put all these marine parks up and down the coast, which would have just destroyed recreational fishing. And if it wasn't for us and banding together with the recreational fishermen, that would have got through. So it's really important for them to be engaged.
Look, I'll give an example. So I'm a member of Shooters, Fishers, Farmers, New South Wales, and I have been since I got my R license. And so when I got my R license, and I kind of found out how it happened, I just joined the party, and now I can't vote. Well, legally I can't, but I can't vote. I can't do it. But so I just see it as a donation.
Because you're not a resident of New South Wales.
That's right. I'm a member of New South Wales. I've contributed to Phil Donato. I just see it as a donation. I just see it, it's like buying a raffle ticket or something like that. It's to me. So, and I know that's not by far the most you can do, but I think for a lot of people, and I'm sure you'd appreciate it, membership means something to a party. So people being members, and putting at least some money on the stump makes all the difference, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, look, without membership, we don't have a party. Like, there's legal requirements that we have to have members, and they've just sort of changed that federally to make it harder for smaller parties. But yeah, look, it's important. Donations are important, but even bums on polling booths on election day is probably just as important. The data sort of shows if you've got someone on a polling booth, it more than likely doubles your vote on that polling booth.
Is that right?
Yeah, so it's extremely important, and in some ways, I actually say to people that's actually probably more important than a donation. I'd rather you stand on polling booths for a couple of hours and hand out votes.
Well, there's pretty much a straight answer, isn't it?
That's the answer we're looking for.
If you want to help, and you just give, donate some, half a day every 3 years or something, or 4 years, and away you go.
Yeah, the problem with New South Wales state elections, it normally falls within the fallow rut. It's in and around sort of mid-March into March.
That's them working against you.
You can have a few unwashed hunters come out of the bush and sit there for you if you like. Oh, that's a shame. So, also interested in the type of issues, like one that comes to mind that I've brought up once or twice with various different people, just out of curiosity, and it relates to state parks. And you were talking about, culling of animals just happens to be at the moment pre-raw, pre-rut. There was another one that came up was they tend to do a lot of wild dog baiting just before a lot of hunters go into the parks that use dogs. Are they the sorts of things people should be bringing up? Because I think that's, if the answer is we have to do it within the right cycle of the deer, of the dogs breeding, and that just happens to be scientifically 3 months after they drop fawns, their main, I don't know, whatever it is, or it could just be that's the way we've always done it over there, so that's the way we're always going to do it. Are you guys the right people to be talking to on how to bring that up and change it within New South Wales government?
Yeah, definitely, particularly if they're not notifying users of those public lands that this is happening. Like, we've had a few reports of that where people are going for a hunt in the state forest and they don't realise that it's been baited until they actually get in there and they see the signs. That they've never received a notification. It doesn't always happen, but we've had a few occasions of that. We've also got the issue at the moment that I'm dealing with there's a national park up in the Kempsey area, and they're reviewing the plan of management. One of their plans of management is to actually allow wild dogs to sort of propagate in the parks as an alternative or a replacement to dingoes as the apex predator. And I'm just like, well, how are the locals feeling about that? How are the local farmers feeling about that? So that's a fairly live issue at the moment. I'm heading up to Kempsey in a couple of weeks to talk to the locals about that, because that's just nonsensical. The wild dog issue is like a massive issue up in the north coast of New South Wales, and for national parks to make such a proposal it just boggles the mind.
Well, yeah, because it's certainly not going to be the wild animals in the bush that cop it. It's going to be the fenced up, sheep and young cattle and things like that are going to be on the fringe farmland, I imagine. The other animals in the parks are too fast.
Yeah, and it's not as if you can actually say to those wild dogs, just stay within the park, be a good dog and don't venture out and kill calves or sheep or whatever you. It's it's just I scratch my head.
Wow.
Well, I saw first time ever I saw a wild dog in Saverne on the last week. That's the first time I ever seen one there. But then again, it was looking like I've never seen it before with the amount of rain, and so you would assume that things are moving. So
what'd you do to it?
I didn't get a shot on it. Moved too quick.
Yeah, they are pretty cluey quick.
Yeah. Well, actually, yep. I shot one in a very similar circumstance a little while ago. So what I did was I stopped and I said, just wait, because it was eyeing up some roos, and I thought, and you could see the roos still looking at it, and I thought it might show itself again, because that's only based on what last one did, but it didn't show itself. But so it was so it was eyeing up some roos. So I was hoping it was going to come back again, but it didn't. But we certainly try to line up on it.
Well, I've got an indicating dog, and I was out the other day, and she got onto the scent of some. Well, I didn't realise it was wild dogs at the time, but she tracked them up a hill and into the small little den area, and 3 of them erupted within meters of me. One of them came for the dog and got a kick in the ribs, but there was no way I could get a shot. It was too close, and all of a sudden they were off in the long grass and gone. But yeah, fairly brazen, which is a bit of a problem, but. That's why the owners of the land want us to be in there and pushing them away.
Yeah, well, I've had my fair share of brushes with wild dogs in Victoria, and it's not a pleasant experience when you stumble upon a den and they're not too happy to see you.
So we also see in your bio with your involvement with SSAA. Now it said what I read was you were past president. Was that state? How's that work out?
That was the local Illawarra branch. I was president there for, I think, maybe 7 years. And that was sort of before I formed the Illawarra Hunting Club with the brother-in-law and a few others. So, yeah, so I was with them for 6-7 years. Went to state conferences. Beat my head against a brick wall against old management. Yeah, and look, they've jumped on board with the party and are actually supporting us now, and we're working well together on big issues like the criminal use bill that the government tried to bring into New South Wales, which was all about firearm precursors. So to try and clamp down on so-called illegal firearm manufacturing, but it was so vague that Bunnings would have been in trouble. So like any average person with a decent toolkit in their shed would have been in trouble. If you had a vice, other bits and pieces, you could have been labelled as reasonably suspected of manufacturing firearms, and then there goes your right to silence. There goes the right to silence in everyone in your household. You actually would have had to physically actually help the cops build a case against you by opening up your computers, etc., etc. So it was just a diabolical bill, and so far that's gone a bit quiet now. We sent it to a committee, which my colleague chaired, and we were able to sort of get all the other parties to see sense that this wasn't a good thing. So, which is hard when it comes to firearms politics. Everyone wants to be seen to be getting tough on firearms, even if it's actually not, going to achieve what they think it's going to achieve. They just want to be seen.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be supporting positive firearms legislation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Brian Boyle said something, along the lines of, you either legislate for legal behaviour or you legislate for illegal behaviour.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier for them to target legal behaviour than the illegal behaviour.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So there was a SSAA, and what was one of the other things I read you're involved in? No, it might have been the Illawarra Hunting Club, and that Federation of Hunting Clubs has got the one that Craig Golding's involved in that we can never remember what it's called. It starts with W.
Winter Caribou.
Winter
Caribou
hunters and anglers. Yep.
I know this now. I thought when you said it, it was a Winter Caribou Hunting Club. Where is this place in Australia that we can hunt the caribou in the winter? But we've had a number of listeners now join, or a few, I wouldn't say a number, a small handful maybe, have now joined that after we had that had Craig on, and I've now committed it to memory. I know how to pronounce it.
So the Illawarra Club might get a tick up as well. So there you go.
There you go. We'll take it. And look, Craig's a good friend of our clubs as well. Like he's just up the mountain from us anyway in the Southern Highlands, so he's not too far, and we've combined on a few different events and things.
So if that's your kind of working life, tell us about hunting for you. What's that look like?
Before you go, I can't let you off yet. No, I can't let you off yet. This is the concerning thing about all of the stuff that you just spoke about. How long before a piece of this legislation that gets tried to sneaks through sneaks through? Like, you guys have got to be on guard all the time to stop the rubbish that's coming through. That's a lot of reading, a lot of documentation. How many scouts have you got out there stopping this stuff?
I can't tell you how many scouts we've got, but I think that's part of the reason why we, building up like the Federation of Hunting Clubs and building up these other small hunting clubs is to actually increase the number of scouts. It is a constant job. Like, we're just at the moment we're dealing with another one. You probably were aware of the John Edwards incident, where that bloke was given a commissioner's permit when he shouldn't have. The registry has now proposed a whole stack of legislation changes to apparently deal with that. None of the proposed changes actually address the issue that one of their staffers knew that he had a criminal background, knew he had a history of domestic violence and abuse, and still gave him a commissioner's permit. It's all about targeting law-abiding firearm owners, like trying to reduce the amount of firearms we can own, giving the commissioner, powers to seize estates without giving a family member the opportunity to transfer the firearms, getting rid of our P650 form, which is critical for shooting and firearm safety testing, and a whole raft of other things. So it's as you said, Ian, it's just a constant on guard, and I don't know how long till something sneaks through. Well, it won't sneak through without us knowing about it. It'd just be whether we'll be able to convince the other members of Parliament that it's not in the best interests of everyone for it to be passed. We're able to do that. We've so far been able to do that with the precursor bill, and look, we hope to do it with these proposed changes over the Edwards inquest. So it's ever vigilant.
I don't want to leave it on doom and gloom. It's just a tough thing to see all the time. It's a concerning thing for everyone involved. And in Queensland we're trying to improve our access. And in New South Wales you're defending it. So it's a tough conversation to have, really.
Yeah,
I think it's an important point though, because and I mean, I've been interested in this for some years, and and much of the criticism you see is that shooters, fishers, farmers are aligning with one side of politics and another, and people not, I suppose, looking at that from a very singular viewpoint and not realizing that your job is to try and get numbers, isn't it? That's your job, is to get numbers. So it's the vote the right way is the vote the right way. It doesn't it's not so much,
and it's dependent on the issue too. And in New South Wales at the moment, well, particularly in the upper house, the government doesn't have a majority. So, Labor and the crossbench, do vote together on a lot of things, but a lot of it's actually about improving transparency. We have these things called Standing Order 52s, which are like GIPA requests on steroids. So we can just request documents, emails, text messages, you name it, on an issue. So a lot of the votes where we're all voting together is about, requesting those documents, because we've asked the questions in the chamber, we've asked the questions in the budget estimates, and we get Mickey Mouse answers. So, we reach for those, those call for papers, to get the answers ourselves. So that gets used a lot, and they say, oh, well, you're always voting with that side of the, that side of the political sphere. It's like, well, it's, they're also voting with us on those things.
I think that's it.
You want
that's it. That's it.
And why wouldn't we be voting for more transparency in government decisions?
Actually, like that. I like that. Then they're voting with us. I think that's a good one. Oh, you're always with them? No, they're with us.
Yeah.
I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, and look, there's some things where everyone's polar opposites and poles apart, and we won't get agreement on. But then there's some things that we generally all do support, like procedural fairness and transparency, and of course we're all going to agree on that, except the government.
That's right, because they're the ones you're prosecuting at the time.
Yeah.
So, but I think that is, that's one of the, for me, that's one of the frustrations. People go, it's like, it's this binary party line type voting, and they think, no, it's far more complicated with that. And you got to, if you want to win, you got to win. So you've got to.
And particularly firearms. In New South Wales anyway, I'd say, well, who has brought up more negative things, firearms related? Is it the Libs or the Labor? And hands down at the moment, it's the Libs.
Right.
So, it was the Labor government that gave us public land hunting. We had to push them there, but it was essentially them that signed on the dotted line.
And that was probably because, they realized that they had to broker a deal.
Yeah.
So
that's it.
It's a very interesting, as I said, it's a very interesting, nuanced game. And unfortunately people tend to think it's like, this or that, it's like left or right, or pick whatever side you want, but it never works that way in real life.
No, and look, there might be 30, 40 votes a day on various issues, and some of them are fairly innocuous, and some of them are fairly stupid, ridiculous motions brought up by certain groups, but it's still a vote, that we have to make a choice one way or the other.
And with, like you guys in the lower house, like Phil Donato and so on, I mean, what kind of working relationship do you have with them? Because they are this is just, I suppose, me not really understanding the full process, but is that do you have like the equivalent of a cabinet where you guys all get together, or does that lower house and upper house kind of work separately?
No, look, we have party room meetings where we flesh all this out. But in saying that, though, on an average sitting week, we're up in each other's offices talking, because politics is fairly fluid and things come up, and what a lot of don't realise is that a lot of the votes and decisions have already been made before people walk into the chamber. A lot of negotiations in people's offices or in hallways, etc. So
as you'd expect.
Yeah. So a lot of these, so we have a party room meeting, but there's also constant communication with each other throughout the day, throughout a sitting week. And when we're not sitting, we're still talking to each other and on the phone or via email or via Teams, just to stay in touch with each other about what the issues are.
And geographically, you guys got a huge swathe out there west of the Great Divide, haven't you?
Yeah, we geographically, I think we're close to 50% of the state, something ridiculous like that. Yeah, so like Roy's electorate, which is Barwon, that's around the size of Germany. It's
Wow, that's big enough to nearly take over the world.
yeah. It's fun driving around that. It's lots of long drives between towns, etc. Helen's electorate in Murray, that's a similar size. Yeah, and Phil's got a decent size electorate too.
So that's your, for those who are listening, that's the lower house sort of thing, and there's you, and who's your partner in the upper house?
That's Robert Borzak. He's been there for a while. He was the chairman of the Game Council for a while before he came into politics. He was the chairman, and when one of our members, Roy Smith, passed away, and then he was sort of tapped on the shoulder and said, "Come in." So he came out of retirement and has been in here ever since.
There you go. Right, moving on from the current politics questions, because there's a couple of other things we want to cover off. Mark, did you bring your questions today?
No, but I can ask them. I can always
we got to
so,
ask.
Okay, here we go. So, okay, when you're with Roy on the big drives, what's playing on the radio?
We're normally in separate cars, talking to each other over the CB. It's either, geez,
don't be shy.
No, look, it's either whatever we can get on the radio station, really.
Not listen to the news, eh?
Yeah, ABC. Yeah. My staff is probably not, who normally comes on Truths with me, is probably not as keen about my music taste as I am. So
it's one way to answer it. All right, then. My first question then is hunting related. What's the best or your favourite hunting book that you may have read or are reading?
I might be a bit biased, but probably it's a book by Aaron Grant on Roosa.
Right.
Because I am a Wollongong boy, so it's all about the historical, not the history of Roosa, particularly in the Illawarra, etc. It's a really, really good read, and probably
Aaron Grant.
Yeah, Aaron Grant.
And what was the book called?
It's simply called Roosa. So it dispels a lot of myths, that get put out there by the people that just think you can eradicate a rooster out of the Illawarra escarpment, with no problems. So it talks about where they originated from. It's a fairly in-depth book, but it's a really good read.
Excellent. I'm trying to stock up on my hunting books. That's why I asked the question. To get some really good answers. Mark?
Do you drink service station coffee?
Vending machine service station coffee.
Vending machine. No. Vending machine service station coffee.
Look, on the long drives, I don't have much choice.
You always have a choice, mate. You always have a choice.
Default to tea.
Yeah, look, I'm also partial to, particularly out in the Roy's electorate, the service station Baie Marie has some interesting delicacies when there's not much else open. But you do put your life in your hands sometimes when you reach for that Chico roll.
Oh yeah, last week's one. Yeah, it's a tough one. I look after a region,
sorry, mate.
I look after a region of my work where I claim to look after the furthermost Western Council, and now we're not quite owned by Queensland yet, but easternmost council, which is offshore. So it's a big area that I cover, and I struggle with those station Baie Maries. They're terrible. Some of them are. They've got to be. The crust on a Chico roll can get really thick after a week.
Yeah. Well, there's also the country Chinese restaurant. where you get your month's worth of MSG in one
Yeah,
meal.
yeah. It's like asking for the fish and chips, when you're on the western side of Roma. There's no fresh fish out here, man. It's got to come from somewhere on a truck. Surely you want the beef.
Yeah, but we always joke. We always ask the local waiter at the Chinese restaurant, are the prawns local? We're west of the Great Divide, and look, to some of their credit, they actually without cracking a smile, yes they are, of course. So
in our tank at the back.
Yeah.
So there's a I won't name it because it could end in legal dramas, but there's a roadhouse that I know that you've stopped at. Okay, I know you've stopped at it, and
Okay.
I was there a couple of years ago, and mate was filling the truck up, and I walked in, and in the hot box was like those 4 little winglet things, chicken drumstick winglet things. So I said, "Oh, I'll take them." So 1, 2, 3, and dropped the 4th one, dropped it, bang, on the floor. So I went. There's a kind of like a look between the glass because looking through, and she turned around and dropped it in the bin. So I had 3. So I walked out. I was chatting with my mate. He's, I'm sitting there. I'm leaning against the truck eating it. He's filling up the tank. He finishes, goes in to pay for it, goes in, pays for it, comes walking out.
You're not going to say it, are you?
He's eating it, and I just lose it. And he's wondering, what are you laughing at?
No way! It's not only come off the
literally,
floor; it's come back out of the bin.
Straight back in.
Oh gosh!
So yeah, that's
terrible.
That's the one.
Right.
So
Next
the
question.
last, you got another question?
No.
One?
Yeah, I'm recovering from that one.
Okay. No, well, then I'll do it because I got this. I asked this question, but I actually got asked this question by Jono in Inglewood. So, ham and cheese. If you ask for ham and cheese, do you expect tomato or not tomato?
These are you're asking the tough questions tonight.
That's it, mate. That's it.
No, look, I think you shouldn't expect tomato. Like if you want the roof of your mouth scorched, then you will ask for tomato. But I expect just ham and cheese.
That's it. I think that's exactly what happened. I said, guess the sandwich, mate. He'd go, okay, well, yeah, ham and cheese. And he'd realize that, want tomato with it? I want a tomato. I would have told it's tomato.
This is a tough question. All right, well, that's good.
That's
That's the consistent set of questions that start the conversation off. So it's good to do that an hour and a bit into it. So talk to us now, Mark, about hunting. So you're in a bit of Roosa country down where you are in the Illawarra. You've just crossed the border and gone and chased some samba. Thank God we can cross the border again.
Yeah.
Nice to see the world opening up again for us, even if, it's going to be international shortly. But what have you chased, and what's your passion around hunting, and what's on the list? Where do you want to take it?
Well, definitely deer hunting is my passion. I think that's where I sort of cut my teeth. That's sort of how I got introduced to it. My brother-in-law took me deer hunting up on the escarpment, and it was sort of hooked ever since. And so yeah, I think that's still my passion. But in saying that, when I'm out in the state forest, I'm not particularly fussy, because it can be such hard hunting, with the pressure that they sometimes get. So if there's a goat or a pig, I'm not necessarily going to say no. If it's a rabbit, I'll probably leave it and hope that something bigger comes around. But yeah, it's for me definitely it's deer hunting. Not necessarily, desperately out there chasing big heads. Like I'm happy to fill the freezer if something, if there's a decent stag floating around on some properties I've got access to, then I'll put some effort in to chase them. But I'm just as happy to fill the freezer and pass the meat around to friends. So look, I eventually want to get overseas and do a bit of hunting over there. My sister has moved to New Zealand a few years ago and has got a few kids that I haven't seen because of COVID. So I want to be able to get over there and see
Whereabouts does she move to?
She's in Christchurch. So
not a bad spot to base yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And so we've got some Kiwi relatives too that are right into hunting as well, and the traditional Maori hunting. So they've said that they'll take me and induct me into the tribe and get me on some tribal lands to hunt, which would be a pretty cool experience. So yeah, want to get over there, but also want to probably hit, the northern US, and just get into some of that beautiful country, where not many people have seen, not many people have walked. We have to catch a plane in and land on a body of water, and you're totally
unreal.
Unreal.
Yeah. I mean, and not too far from home, even, out of Christchurch, we've done some hunts out of there. Where you might drive an hour from Christchurch and then jump on a chopper and go up in the Alps. It's a different experience altogether, very similar to what you're talking about overseas. In the US, you can get right into the middle of the back blocks up there and really experience something different. So it's definitely worth it. Ever decided against trying to chase wapiti in New Zealand in the fjords? Is that?
Oh, look, I'm not against it. My fitness level would probably tell you I'm against it. I think I need to work on that a bit before I.
The sensible Mark over here says, "Are you stupid?" Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Too many late nights sitting in Parliament isn't great for the health and fitness.
Sure. Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, it's you've still got some dreams of getting out there and doing some things overseas, so that's pretty good. But state forest hunting is obviously a big part of it. You're living and breathing that.
Massive part. Like getting access to private property in the Illawarra is just, it's like gold. Like it took me several years to do it. It's really hard. So the state forest in New South Wales is just the easiest way for people that are new to it to actually get out there and just start, seeing things, and actually learning. I was probably lucky enough that my brother-in-law had access to a few properties, and then I got drawn in this ballot that was run through the Game Council at the time to cull deer on one of the mines down in Dapto in Illawarra. I wouldn't call it hunting. It was, you had a lane that you could shoot in, and you had to sort of sit there and wait. But that's how I shot my first rooster, actually, and I guess it sort of took the pressure off. That everyone has when they're trying to bag their first deer. There's when you get your crosshairs on one, it's a bit of a nervous thing, because you've been waiting for it. You've been probably working a bit hard to get it, and you don't want to stuff it up. So that was probably an easy way for me to, I guess, pop the cherry on shooting my first deer. But ever since then, it's just been sort of state forests, and particularly through the club. We do probably do a dozen or so club hunts a year in various forests around the state, and we normally have about 10, 12 guys, plus coming out with us.
Yep.
So not knowing that area, when you refer to the Illawarra escarpment, is that private or public land you're talking about?
The majority of it is actually national parks and water board or catchment authority.
Okay.
And then there's sort of a smattering of private properties that are on the escarpment. So that's why managing the deer is so difficult, because you have national parks who don't do a great job, and then you've got catchment authority who they've got contractors in, and once again, people they go in there and shoot them, and they're not allowed to take them out. And then you've got private property, and some people, some owners will let you access it, others won't. But because the Illawarra is sort of developed and built all the way up to the escarpment, it's also very difficult in terms of hunting with a firearm. In I guess urban areas. So that adds to the complexity of it. There's not a lot of properties now where you can actually get in there with a rifle and try and manage the population.
Are there reds in there as well?
No, haven't seen reds. There's a few Samba Roosa crosses.
Yeah, okay.
Floating around. I think
That's a rhubarb, isn't it?
rhubarbs, yeah. I think a lot of them have come from. There used to be a deer farm a bit further south in Albion Park, and they escaped and have sort of bred up with the Roosa. So there's a few fallow floating around, and as you go a bit further south, so Nowra area, there's Cheadle and Reds as well. So, but yeah, Illawarra is predominantly Roosa.
Okay.
That's good. I've learned something tonight. I've got friends down there. I'm pretty sure they're involved in the club that you're talking about, and I could have sworn they told me that they were Reds down there. And when I've been invited down there to hunt with them, I could have sworn they were inviting me on a red deer hunt. But maybe they're not massive deer, hunters. But yeah. Anyway, that's cool. That's good to know that there's another rooster population down there.
Yeah, look, there's certainly Reds further south, but I can't say I've seen any Reds on.
And with your club trip out Central West, where's that head? I mean, you don't have to give me the exact location, but what's Central West for you guys?
I'll give it to you. It's so look, Oberon Way. So there's there's probably about 5 or 6 forests out there that we hit reasonably regularly. So you're looking at Vulcan, Gurnang, Mount David. So like Vulcan's it's a big forest. It's fairly easy walking. It's you can hunt it as hard or as easy as you want. You can be a taxi assassin and just drive up to them if you want. And then just park it.
No, you can't.
Or I suppose in modern parlance, it's Uber, isn't
it? So you can just park up and walk into a spot and sit, or you can actually tread the boards and put some Ks up. It's totally up to you.
I only kind of know that area through tourism. I've never really hunted down there. We've been doing road trips into New South Wales as a family, but so I kind of know what you mean. So because when you said Central West, I immediately thought Pilliga. Certainly those places like Oberon and Vulcan, they're certainly names that I know, and I know people are hunting them, and I think I've been through Oberon as a kid, to be honest.
No, that's fine. I just had an interesting thought. Completely random. It's the time of year right now that we're starting to book up for fallow rut, right? Especially when you're booking New South Wales State Forests, and you're competing with everybody else to book the parks you want on time. I can say this now because by the time this airs, I won't be telling anyone any secrets that they won't be able to use until next year. But there's certain parks that if you really want to get access to, you've got to be up at midnight booking those parks when the day ticks over. I've just realised you guys are in daylight savings, so half the reason I'm not getting parks because it's bloody 11 o'clock. You guys get up and do it, my time, and they're gone. I'm just going to hang around until 11 o'clock tonight to be able to book a park that I really want to get access to. You always see them book out well before you can get access to them, and it's daylight savings. I've just realised it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's getting harder and harder actually, and that's one of the other things we're pushing for politically is more forests to be opened, because even forests that weren't traditionally booked out during the rut are actually now getting booked out quicker.
Which is a fantastic problem to have, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's also, I guess, a bit frustrating.
Most definitely.
People. Like places like Mooragle were always very popular. They're the ones that traditionally you always used to have to get up at midnight to book, and then they one of the Mooragles, I think it was South. Went to a ballot. And that sort of.
That's what they were calling deer. They were a game. They were something that had a different classification, wasn't it? You can only be there 4 days or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to any deer that you took, you had to actually take the jawbone out and drop it in the box. So it was aged by DPI, and so that the ballot, I think, has calmed it down a bit, but in saying that, it's probably moved some of the pressure onto some of these other forests too. But we're a victim of our own success, because we've grown public land hunting, we've grown firearm ownership. I think largely on the back of public land hunting, and so it's just more and more people are essentially fighting over the real estate to access.
Yeah, I can see a way to get more land if you bring your political might and capability into Queensland and adopt us into your program. Get access to the parks up here as well. Maybe you'll get more land. It'd be great. We're always looking for another angle to convince our government to let us have a go, but it's a difficult one. It's an ongoing battle.
Yeah, it is. But they only need to look at the success of New South Wales, the success of Victoria. Like, Victoria have been hunting in public land for 30 plus years, and they've had very few issues. New South Wales, slightly less time, but still the same thing.
Still no issues.
Still no issues. And the DPI in New South Wales put out a report the other year, and fishing and hunting was, like, I think, the second or third highest economic contributor. So over sheep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, there's your argument.
It's crazy. It's crazy that you just turn around and say no, absolutely no to an industry that could bring in that much money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, when we did the big road trip hunt back in 2018, and we ended up in Narrabri. Basically, the owner, operator, editor of the newspaper wanted to know what we were doing. He said, tourism for the town. He literally rapped that we ended up on the bloody local paper. So Queensland brings tourism, hunting tourism to Narrabri, because they knew exactly what we were doing. We were in town spending money.
Oh, and that was the same story we told to the servo in Narrabri on our way through, because I remembered your story. And he said, "Oh, you're all in the same hunting crew." As we spent $1,500 on fuel on the way through between the whole crew. They enjoy the visitors. Yeah, and raided the hot box.
Yeah.
Cleaned it out.
What? There was anger in town because every hot box had been empty, though.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They were near a Chico rifle for 200 kilometres square.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Just one piece of chicken.
Yeah. No, for sure. Mark, I was just going to ask if there was anything else, any other messages that you would pass on to people that were listening that, could lend a hand, support, do anything. Is there anything that we've missed that you might want to let people know about, things that they should be pointed to that are topical today, or things that are coming up?
Well, I think I raised the firearms regulation changes because the Edwards. The other thing we're battling in New South Wales is animal welfare reform, and I use the word animal welfare loosely. It's actually more of a transition to animal rights law than anything else, and that has a potential to impact on hunters and fishers dramatically. Changing the definition of what's cruelty to include things like unnecessary harm. So who decides what's unnecessary or necessary? Other proposals that sort of basing the animal welfare laws on these five domains of animal welfare, and basically, if you look at those 5 domains, if you interact with an animal in any way, you're somehow breaching it.
It's truly weird, that stuff.
Has it got legs?
Sadly, it does, because the National Party agriculture minister at the time, who's now been sacked, essentially did a deal with the Animal Justice Party to actually, try and get this across the line. And a lot of the hunting and fishing groups are actually sidelined from the consultation. We only found out about it once a discussion paper was out, and then we had to rally all the troops and get them to push back against it, which we've done. But then the agriculture minister at the time actually kicked it to a committee called the State Development Committee, which has nothing to do with agriculture or animal welfare. It's but it had a friendly chair, and then a day after he referred it to that inquiry, one of the members of the Animal Justice Party sent a letter to sub into it. So it was a stitch up from the beginning. But look, we're pushing back against that pretty hard. We've got all the fishing and hunting groups on. We've got the New South Wales farmers on our side as well, pushing back against it. We've got all the sort of dog breeding groups pushing back against it as well, because it has impacts on them. So that's probably one of the other big fights that we have. And look, the marine parks, from a fishing perspective, the marine parks debate is back on again as well. They want to have that fight again with us. So that's another big one.
That animal, that animal justice or whatever it is, that legislation, I'm just surprised how that's not a bigger issue, because that's leading to a fundamental change of society. It's like, you can't have pets. You can't have pets. It's not like it's they might say, over here sentient animals feel pain, so you shouldn't fish it. But you can't have a pet.
That was.
I mean, and it almost goes to to its nth degree. It goes, there is no agriculture.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Cows on trucks, and
there is no agriculture. There is no agriculture.
There can't be. We all be having test tube beef burgers.
Well, that's right. There's no agriculture, and I have, if you want to see the apocalypse, see what happens when everyone walks off the land in Australia. It's not going back to the land of milk and honey. It's going back to land, tanner and scrub.
Yeah.
That's it.
You just see that on properties that have actually been put aside for so-called biodiversity offsets. They're just full of bloody weeds.
That's it. Just like we've never got rid of any vertebrate that's been introduced. Whenever we've walked off land, it hasn't gone back to grassland with developed eucalypts. It's gone to mongrel scrub and full of weeds that you can't get anywhere near.
Yeah, and that's because the Aboriginals actually managed it. They managed it through fire stick. So they weren't just walking off the land and leaving it either.
So it's just bizarre. That's really, for me, that's scratching head stuff, because that's literally fundamentally to change society. Is no more pets, no more. That's it. Well, I don't even know. I mean, I'm assuming it would basically mean the death of hundreds of millions of animals. In fact, that's it. Well, what have we got? We've got 65 million head of cattle and something like about 30 million head of sheep. So what do? They all just wither on the vine.
Well, I think the point is that the definition is unclear. So until somebody pushes that definition that far, it's still unknown, right?
No, but the thing is, that definition exists already. It's just that's where these people are heading. They're heading to this kind of utopian model where you're in the paddock, doing ring rosy with a cow and a sheep and a dog, and they're all living in harmony. Some weird thing like that. But so basically, it challenges the whole, the fundamental approach that we have to engaging with animals. It changes everything on that. So it's bizarre.
And I think the frustrating thing is, us as hunters, we don't necessarily force our way of life on other people. We'll talk to people about it, but we won't shove it down their necks. Whereas the other side of it, that's essentially what they want to do is, just because I don't want to eat meat, then that means the whole world shouldn't have to eat meat or shouldn't be allowed.
Which is a very interesting point. We seem to be on the defensive. I say we. I sit here talking to you, so I'm now on we. We seem to be on the defensive from these attacks from groups that want to stop our lifestyle. At what point in time do we run the attack, the defensive as an attack back to them, and keep them busy, by by challenging some of the things that they're really passionate about. Do we ever do that? We're too busy doing it, defending rather than.
Yeah, look, I think we are too busy running defence, because it's just there's so many things being thrown at us, and just thinking about that second half of your point now in terms of why don't we run an offence on something that they hold dear? I don't know what they hold dear.
Yeah.
What exactly do they?
I don't know.
What exactly do they stand for, except poo-pooing someone else's lifestyle choices?
That's right. It's always the removal of something. It's not. Yeah. So it's actually you're right. It's actually hard to define, because it would appear that nearly the whole argument is the removal of something. So there's like, no matter how often you say no, it doesn't build anything. It's just the absence of activity. And that seems to be their whole pitch. It's not like we want to replace hunting with this because we believe it's more morally or whatever it is. It's no, just stop that. And when you stop that, then this kind of utopia will spring out of the ground type thing. There's never any kind of replace. It's just simply stop. And I think that's why so many people, and me included, get so frustrated with it, because it's not someone putting an argument to you saying, well, have you considered this as a better alternative? It's like, no, stop.
Yeah. We're all frustrated. It's just the way it is. Yeah, it's a killer. And mate, you must take my hat off to you, because you must have this conversation all the time. So look, I appreciate you coming on and rehashing it. It's been a really good conversation, and I know a lot of people will get a lot out of it. I know that I hadn't considered the fact that the voting happens while we're all up in the bush. So maybe there is a campaign to us all to come down out of the bush, the greater unwashed, demolishing the Chico roll and sitting on a polling booth for a day. That's not too much to ask, surely.
Yeah, but we try and sell it as it's one day out of 365, so you can hunt those other 364 days.
Absolutely.
And it's only once every 4 years too, so it's
once every 4 years.
Yeah, so it's not even 1 year.
It should be campaigned. It should be campaigned through every hunting club that uses New South Wales state land. There's no reason why 100 members from a branch in Queensland can't go and support that initiative. Something I hadn't even considered, Mark, was joining the party, because a lot of people wouldn't consider joining New South Wales because they live in Queensland, but this is just the education that sits behind it. There's nothing wrong with the donation, I guess. I don't know if you're allowed as a Queenslander. Are you allowed to join? You don't fill in anything that says where I live.
You've got the Queensland branch of the party anyway, so you may have the option. But no matter where you join, you'll count towards our federal numbers. So which we need to run a federal campaign. So it all counts.
But I mean, I think that the point there, and I think that's both relevant to New South Wales hunters, but also to Queensland hunters, especially if there's some, there is a candidate running in the northern end of New South Wales, or the southern end of, equivalent southern end of Queensland. Turn up today and hand out how to vote cards. I mean, perfect opportunity to find a Chico roll and drink bad coffee and actually do some good. So, I mean, and, as you said, that's actually really, really important. That will turn into votes.
Yeah, we have that relationship with Victoria. We have those instances where the Victorian guys will come over and give us a hand, and then we'll go over to the Victorian side and give them a hand in our respective elections. So there's no reason why we can't replicate that for Queensland as well, because as you've alluded to, like a stack of you guys are coming over and raiding our state forests.
You bet. Border raiding. I've got the T-shirt.
Right. Well, we are Queenslanders, so we're natural. We're naturally inclined to do stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll even send you a Hunter's Campfire Border Raiders T-shirt.
Actually, I reckon that is I want to do that on the back. I want to say, Border Raider
That's already done, Mark. It's happening.
or eye patch, Pirates.
All right, cool. Well, I think we'll call it at that. It's been a really awesome conversation, Mark. I appreciate you sitting up late. I know you're a busy man, doing a lot down there for us. So awesome. Thank you. And look, we'll keep in touch for sure. And hopefully you'll see a bunch of Queensland number plates show up polling day. That's a goal of mine. I'm going to write down and drag some people across. We'll do it.
No, look, thanks for having us. And look, more importantly, hopefully I see a few Queensland number plates in some state forests. I'll stop and say today.
You should. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Good stuff. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Okay, guys.
No worries.
Great one.